Find other great podcasts like this one at Podmoth.network.
Hello, twisted humans.
Do you find yourself wanting to know more about the latest murder, conspiracy, cult, or haunting?
Then this is the podcast for you.
In 1952, there was a record high of UFOs reported. 1,500 sightings.
There has been evidence of human sacrifice, devil worship, and it is haunted by more spirits than can be counted.
A family of 2 adults and 2 kids reportedly saw a giant flying thing with glowing red eyes.
And meanwhile, the family's nanny that helped Veronica to care for her and Lucian's children was found bludgeoned to death in the basement of their family home. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Sierra, and this is Twisted and Uncorked.
Welcome to the Getting Down and Wordy podcast ad.
What do we do on this podcast?
Well, it's the first Edda musical podcast.
Can you try that again in real words so that people can understand?
Fine. We talk about the intersection of popular music and language.
Oh, can we also talk about Eurovision?
Okay.
Find us on Apple and Spotify.
We are a Podmoth Network podcast.
Welcome to the Brutal, Bizarre, and Boozy podcast. I'm Deklan, the son.
And I'm Jane, the mom. This is the podcast where we talk about brutal crimes, bizarre occurrences, and get you drunk with cocktails themed around one of our stories. To lighten things up, we'd like to end our time with a chaser. Please keep in mind some of our stories might be upsetting to young or sensitive ears.
We love hearing from our listeners, so feel free to contact us by email or social media. You can find our contact info in the show notes for this episode. If you'd like to support us through Patreon, you can find us there at Brutal, Bizarre, and Boozy podcast, or use the link in our show notes.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us once again for another episode of Brutal, Bizarre, and Boozy. How are you today, Mom?
I'm doing great. How are you, Deklan?
Oh, can't complain. What story do you have for us today?
I have a story about some strange things that happened at a girls' boarding school in Mexico. Yeah.
Interesting.
Spooky, weird, who knows? Kind of a mass hysteria kind of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. What story do you have for us today?
I have the Ludlow Massacre.
Oh.
Yes, not great.
That doesn't sound good. Anytime you say massacre with your story, it's not a good thing.
No, not usually. To go with this, I have the Coal Miner's Daughter cocktail. To make it, you need 1.5 ounces of bourbon, 3/4 ounce lemon juice, 3/4 ounce honey, 1 teaspoon of ginger syrup, and 1 sprig of lavender. Add all ingredients to a shaker with ice, shake until well chilled, and strain into a rocks glass. Optional garnish of a lavender sprig.
All right. I have to admit, I didn't have any lavender to put in it, and I wasn't going to try and find some. It's not lavender season here. So the lavender bush in the front yard is dormant and sad looking. So there's no lavender in mine.
Me either. I don't even know where you would go to find that.
Not around your house, no. Probably somebody's yard, maybe. But you might look like a weirdo walking up and cutting off a sprig of their lavender bush.
Yeah. Okay, let's give this a try.
Okay. I think it's going to be good even without the lavender. I like that. That's tasty.
I think it would taste
honey
like
syrup.
hand soap if you add the lavender.
It might. Well, depending on how much you use.
Yeah.
I know the recipe said honey, and I used honey syrup instead because every time I've tried to use full honey, it just clumps into and then you don't get the flavor. Yeah. So I did just a honey syrup instead, and it's pretty tasty, and it's not. I thought it was going to be really sweet, but it's not too sweet.
Yeah, not too bad.
It's just right.
Okay, let's talk about the Ludlow Massacre. So, areas of the Rocky Mountains have veins of coal close to the surface, providing significant and relatively accessible reserves. In 1967, these local coal deposits were caught by the attention of William Palmer, who then led a survey team planning the route of the Kansas Pacific Railway. The rapid expansion of the rail transport in the United States made coal a highly valued commodity, and it was rapidly commercialized. At its peak in 1910, the coal mining industry of Colorado employed about 15,800 people, which was about 10% of the jobs in the state.
Wow.
Colorado's coal industry was dominated by a handful of operators, one of which was Colorado Fuel and Iron, which was the largest coal operator in the West and one of the nation's most powerful corporations. At one point, they employed about 7,000 people, controlling about 71,000 acres of coal land. John D. Rockefeller purchased a controlling stake in the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company in 1902. 9 years later, he turned over his controlling interest in the company to his son, John D. Rockefeller Jr., who managed the company from his offices in New York. Mining was dangerous and difficult work. Coal miners in Colorado were constantly threatened by explosions, suffocation, and collapsing mine walls. In 1912, the death rate in Colorado's mines was about 7.06 per 1,000 employees. So,
Ooh.
pretty dangerous job to get into.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was compared to the national rate of about 3.15. So, Colorado was exceptionally dangerous.
Double.
Yes.
More than double. Okay.
In 1914, the United States House Committee on Mines and Mining reported miners were generally paid good according to tonnage of coal produced. So the work that was quote unquote dead work, such as shoring up unstable roofs, was often unpaid, meaning it didn't happen very much.
Oh.
The tonnage system drove many poor and ambitious colliers to gamble with their lives by neglecting precautions and taking on risk, often with fatal consequences. Between 1884 and 1912, mining accidents killed more than 1,700 in Colorado.
Oh.
And in 1913 alone, 110 men died in mine-related incidents.
Wow. That's a lot.
Many coal miners lived in the company-owned town, which meant the coal company owned the land, the real estate, and the amenities such as grocery stores, schools, and doctors. The company believed that raising the miners' living standards would make them loyal and subservient to the mining company. However, the police force in town consisted of security guards armed with machine guns who wouldn't let anyone enter or leave the camp, and would often evict families if they didn't agree with company ethics or standards.
Wow.
The Colorado miners continuously fought for union rights since unionized miners suffered 40% fewer fatalities. This resulted in a strike in 1883. However, the company just hired strikebreakers from Mexico and Europe. This didn't sit well with the miners, and so the union, despite efforts to keep them out, secretly continued their efforts to gain miners safer working conditions. Eventually, they produced a list of 7 demands for the coal miners: recognition of the union as a bargaining agent, compensation for digging coal at a ton rate based on 2,000 pounds. Previously, ton rates were 2,200 pounds, so less work for them to do. But
a little bit.
Enforcement of the 8-hour workday law, payment for dead work, which was like laying tracks, timbering, handling rocks and stuff like that.
Okay.
Weight checkmen elected by the workers to keep company weightmen honest. Right to use any store and choose their boarding houses and doctors. And strict enforcement of Colorado's laws, such as mine safety rules. What are you doing? Oh, sorry, Lulu's going crazy out there.
Lulu's having fun.
Yes. And their final request was to end the company's guard system. In September of 1913, the United Mine Workers of America called a strike. All participants were evicted from their homes and moved into a tent village prepared by the union set up in the canyons near the mine to prevent strike breakers from entering. The coal company hired the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, which is kind of sounds like the Pinkertons, like
Yeah, that's what I was
a group
thinking.
of thugs, kind of that
Right.
worked with the government and companies, and I don't know, didn't seem like great guys. And you'll see why.
It reminds me a lot of the other coal story that we covered. And now off the top of my head, I can't remember what story that was. But I know we've done a mining story a long time ago.
I can't remember. I've done so
Neither
many
do
of
I.
these.
I know. It's been a while.
The Baldwin Felts agents had a bad reputation for their harassment, which consisted of shining spotlights on the camp in the middle of the night, randomly shooting into the tents, killing and maiming people, using an armored car mounted with a machine gun called the Death Special to patrol the camps, and snipers who often shot strikers that got into altercations with the strike breakers.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah. I'm surprised I haven't heard this story sooner because it's kind of crazy.
No kidding.
On October 28th, Governor Ammons called in the National Guard. Their presence initially made both sides calm down, but the National Guard was called in on behalf of the coal company. On March 10th, 1914, the body of a strikebreaker was discovered near the camp. The National Guard claimed that the strikers had killed the man and ordered the tent camp be destroyed. While a majority of the camp was at a funeral for 2 deceased infants, the Guard and the Baldwin Felts agents burned down a majority of their camp. By late spring of that year, the strikers had rebuilt and continued the strike, and the National Guard had been recalled due to funding. However, they did leave some uniforms for the coal miner guards and Baldwin Felt agents, and left some agents in a town nearby in case they were needed again. So they left these thugs a bunch of National Guard outfits to make them seem like they had more power.
Oh, and so people would think they were government and not these
just a bunch of fucking thugs.
assholes that are just shooting into tents. Wow.
On April 20th, 3 guardsmen approached the camp and demanded the release of a man they claimed had been captured by the strikers. The leader of the strike met with the leader of the coal company guards about a half-mile away. During the meeting, a machine gun was set up on the ridge above the camp. Strike breakers were armed and told to flank the camp, and some dynamite was exploded to try and bring in the National Guard again. These explosions alerted the strikers, and women and children ran for cover as the men took up their positions. The fighting back took place for the entire day, with the groups exchanging gunfire. At some point during the exchange, a train stopped in front of the machine guns, which allowed some of the strikers to escape to a field nearby. By 7 p.m., the miner camp consisted of smoldering tents, and the leader of the strike was captured as well as 2 other strikers. The 3 captured were shot in the back after being beaten and tortured and laid out along the railroad for passing trains to see, till the local railroad union demanded the bodies be buried.
Oh, could you imagine? You're not even, like, you're just going to work, not even having anything to do with this shit, on your little train, doing your little train work, and you gotta roll by bodies.
3 dead bodies
Jesus.
that were shot in the back.
Jesus.
During the battle, 4 women and 11 children hid in a pit beneath one tent, where they were trapped when the tent above them was set on fire. 2 of the women and all of the children suffocated, and these deaths became a rallying cry for the United Mine Workers of America, who called the incident the Ludlow Massacre. There are conflicting reports, but 20 to 55 strikers were killed in the massacre, and 3 to 4 guardsmen were killed. Following the massacre was the 10-Day War, which is part of the wider Colorado Coalfield Wars. As the news of the deaths and of the strikers spread, unionized workers took a call to arms as the unions called their workers to gather all the ammunition legally available.
Wow.
In the town of Trinidad, the United Coal Miners of America handed out rifles, pistols, and ammo to any and all strikers. Over the next 10 days, 700 to 1,000 strikers armed to the teeth attacked coal mining companies' guards that were set up all over the state, killing and burning down company buildings. At least 50 people died in the 10-day war, with the majority of casualties being coal miner guards and National Guardsmen. The war was ended after President Wilson sent in the real army to disarm both parties and actually arrest a majority of the coal company's guards. The coal wars in Colorado resulted in about 70 to 100 deaths and was hidden after John Rockefeller bought the local newspapers to conceal the atrocities committed by his command.
Wow.
The United Mine Workers of America eventually ran out of money and the strike was called off. Many of the strikers were replaced by immigrant workers who were cheaper to employ, and a total of 407 strikers were arrested, 332 of which were indicted for murder, which doesn't make any sense if there's about 100 people that died. How do you get arrest 332 people for murder?
That's a good question.
Yeah, but that is the Ludlow Massacre.
Wow. I didn't know where that was going, but my goodness. That is...
Yeah, pretty interesting story.
Every time we talk about coal mining, bad shit happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like a very safe job, whether it's the conditions or the people that pay you.
Right. I think that the Carbon County Jail was the episode that we talked about mining. And now I have to figure out what episode that was. That was episode 22.
Oh, Jesus.
That was a long time ago.
170 episodes
That's
ago?
3 years ago.
Jesus.
We covered that January of 2023.
Wow. That's crazy.
That's crazy. So if new people are just finding our podcast, you have years worth of binge material. So please go back and listen to all of the episodes if this is your first.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot. We got some content up there for you guys. Okay, are you ready to hear about this boarding school in Mexico?
Yes.
And it's a weird one for sure. In the late 2000s, so this was like 2006, 2007 or so, Girlstown in Chalco, Mexico became the center of one of the strangest school outbreaks in recent memory. The school was a place built to protect and educate disadvantaged girls. It suddenly turned into the scene of a mysterious illness that spread through hundreds of students. And I know you don't like it when we talk about health stuff, but don't worry, we're not talking about anything gross, no like brain-eating diseases or anything like that.
Okay,
I mean,
good.
Yeah. The event began with a handful of girls and grew until more than 500 people were reported sick, setting off fear, rumors, and a wave of investigations that tried to explain what was happening inside the gates of the boarding school. Girlstown, also known as Villa de las Niñas, is a Catholic boarding school in Chalco, a working-class suburb southeast of Mexico City. It was opened by the Sisters of Mary in 1991 and was designed as a safe, structured place where underprivileged girls could live, study, and receive food, medical care, and support. The school served thousands of girls, and by the mid-2000s, it had become a highly controlled environment with strict routines, limited family contact, and a strong emphasis on discipline and religious life. So basically, this was a boarding school. It was a Catholic boarding school run by the Sisters of Mary, which predominantly the nuns were from South Korea. Why? I couldn't even begin to tell you. It's a strange thing, but apparently they operate multiple boarding schools in different parts of the world, and this just happened to be one for Mexico. But all of the nuns, the majority of them were from South Korea. So there was some cultural stuff why that's important. For many families, Girlstown represented opportunity. Girls went there for an education they might not otherwise have had, along with stability and daily necessities. But the same isolation that made the school feel protective also made it intense. The students lived away from home, followed strict rules, and had little direct contact with the outside world. And they would often go to smaller towns around Mexico and find girls that were living in kind of a not great home life and then offer them, hey, you can come go to school here, live here, we'll feed you, we'll teach you, all of the things. So a lot of girls took them up on the offer because they were like, I'm not getting anywhere living in this little town, not really going to school and having to work. So a lot of the girls thought this was a great opportunity to actually get an education and see, some stuff in the outside world. The trouble appears to have started quietly in late 2006. According to reporting on the outbreak, the first cases involved girls who had trouble walking, along with fever and nausea. At first, it looked like an isolated medical problem. Then, after the Christmas break, more students began showing similar symptoms, and the illness seemed to move through the school in waves. By the time the authorities took a serious look, hundreds of girls had been affected. The numbers reported in the press varied by stage of the outbreak, but major reports described roughly 600 of the girls' 3,600 students as having symptoms at one point or another. What made the situation so alarming was not just the scale, but the way it spread across the boarding school population with a clear physical cause. The symptoms were unsettling and hard to pin down. Girls complained of difficulty walking, trembling legs, nausea, fever, dizziness, headaches, and some reports of partial paralysis.
Is it lead poisoning or something?
No, way weirder. Way weirder. Some had to be carried past the school gates because they could no longer move normally on their own. Other accounts mentioned vomiting, joint pain, and trouble speaking or walking. What made the outbreak especially strange was that the symptoms were not limited to one room, one classroom, or one clearly contaminated area. They appeared across the school, seemed to move from student to student, which made people fear of poisoning, like you said, potential lead poisoning. Maybe there was an infection, or maybe there was something supernatural happening. Right. This is our bizarre story, not our brutal story. In a closed environment like Girlstown, where students live together every day, the fear itself may have helped the crisis spread. Public health authorities examined the girls, searched for an environmental or medical explanation. They did tests, there were consultations, everything that they did, they couldn't reveal a clear infectious disease or a toxin. So lead wasn't the issue, and nobody had like a virus. So they had a hard time explaining what was happening. Reporters noted that the school temporarily allowed parents to take their daughters home, and many of the girls improved after leaving the campus. That detail became one of the key reasons doctors and investigators began leaning away from a conventional outbreak. Mexico's health officials ultimately described the case as a mass psychogenic disorder, also called conversion disorder or collective hysteria. In other words, the illness was understood as real suffering with psychological roots rather than a contagious virus or a poison. But of course, that was a controversial conclusion because basically you're just saying, we couldn't figure out what made everybody sick, so they must just be crazy. I mean, they didn't say that, but read between the lines. That's kind of what they're saying. It fit the pattern that doctors were seeing: sudden symptoms, a shared environment, high stress, and no objective medical cause that could explain every case. And we've talked about mass hysteria before. Specifically, we talked about the dancing plague, and we covered that in episode 41. So another shout out to an old episode from a long time ago. And that was essentially, as a recap, where multiple towns across a long period of time, people just started dancing and nobody knew why they were dancing and there was no explanation. This is kind of similar, but with paralysis instead of dancing. So what started it at Girlstown? Just prior to the first symptoms surfacing, there were whispers spreading across the campus. One of the students, Maria, had created a Ouija board, or a Ouija board, if you want to pronounce it as it's spelled. Several girls would sneak up to the roof of the dorms and play with the board, making attempts to channel spirits and speak with the dead. Rumors were shared that Maria's mother had knowledge of the occult and had witchcraft powers. Of course, this is a Catholic school, so this kind of behavior was strictly forbidden, which likely made it more appealing to teenage girls. Some girls noted having strange experience after playing with the board, from seeing ghosts to hearing babies, non-existent babies crying. Strange things were happening, but the physical symptoms hadn't been reported yet. As word spread about Maria and the Ouija board, the nuns running the school were catching word about the activities, but because most of them were from South Korea, they had no idea what a Ouija board was, had never heard of it, didn't know it was used for anything. They were just like, what's this Ouija board thing? And then people were like, oh, it has to do with the occult. Not cool at a Catholic school, needless to say. So when the head of the school learned about the board, Maria was expelled, which angered her tremendously because she liked living at the school. She didn't want to leave because going home was not a place that she wanted to be at. She didn't like it at home. She was happy at the school. But she was expelled anyway. Somehow, while Maria was waiting to leave the school after her expulsion, she was injured. And part of her finger was cut off. The story about this injury was rather questionable, with claims that a quote-unquote wind came through the room that Maria was in, and that her finger got caught in a door that slammed due to the wind.
Jesus. That's
very
rough. That's
very weird explanation, but whatever. The injury led to a large amount of blood being sprayed around the room, and other students saw the aftermath. As the injured Maria was being led away from the school, it said that she cursed her classmates. The exact words are not known, but soon...
Cursing or cursed like a witch?
Not like... She didn't swear at them. She said, I curse you.
Them? Oh, okay.
She cursed them. Yep. Basically, it's believed that she said something along the lines of, every girl who thought badly of me or who spread rumors about me or just didn't like me would become ill and not be able to walk. And not long after this is when the physical symptoms were reported.
Jesus.
Some described it as starting with a tingling sensation in the legs that progressed to weakness and in some cases paralysis of their legs. People studying the circumstances put aside the idea of an actual curse and focused more on the girls. Researchers and journalists who visited the case pointed to the school's atmosphere as a possible factor. Girlstown was highly regimented with limited communication with family and only occasional visits, which may have increased stress and emotional pressure amongst the students. Teenagers, especially girls in tightly controlled groups, are often the demographic most associated with mass psychogenic illness. This does not mean the girls were pretending, though. Their symptoms were genuine and this distress was real. Mass psychogenic illness can produce physical effects like fainting, nausea, weakness, and dizziness, even when there is no physical toxin involved. In a place like Girlstown, where fear and uncertainty could circulate quickly, one student's symptoms may have reinforced another's, creating a chain reaction that looked like an outbreak. Even after the worst of the episodes passed, the Girlstown case remained one of the most talked about examples of collective illness in Mexico. It attracted intense media attention, partly because the school was enclosed and religious, and partly because the symptoms seemed so dramatic and so widespread. Some coverage framed it as a medical mystery, while other pieces treated it as a case study in stress, isolation, and shared anxiety. The school itself has continued to operate, but the incident left behind a powerful legacy. Girlstown had been built as a refuge, yet for a time it became associated with fear, collapse, and mystery. Whether people interpret the event through medicine, psychology, or something darker, the story still stands out because it is not just about strange symptoms. It was about hundreds of girls trapped inside the same emotional pressure cooker, and all of them trying to understand what the F was happening to them.
I don't like the name.
Girlstown?
Yeah.
You don't like the name of the school?
For the Franklin scandal, that's where they'd get a bunch of their trafficking victims, is from a place called Boys Town.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not cool.
No.
Not cool.
Yeah. You have a chaser for us, Sal?
I do have a chaser. And that is, we are officially, as a podcast, have been downloaded in over 100 countries. We are at 109 counting, which
What's
is
the
pretty
most
cool.
Surprising country?
Oh, gosh. Well, there's countries on that list that I've never even heard of before. So I was like, really? I had to actually look it up. We've got the Czech Republic. We've got Guernsey. We've got
what the fuck is that?
Iraq. I believe Guernsey is like an island off of, I think it's part of the UK. But I don't know. We've got we've got the UAE, Zimbabwe.
You can't drink in the UAE.
Well, they can listen to us. Anyway, so that's my chaser. What chaser do you have today?
I have a listen recommendation for a audio drama called The Hatred. This guy, I can't remember. It's been a while since I listened to it, but this dude gets mistaken for people. Like, if someone sees him, they don't see him, they see the person they hate the most. And so everyone just starts screaming. Like, he goes into a grocery store and she's like, you're supposed to be dead. You're my dead brother. And just like starts freaking out. And this dude ends up seeing him, and the guy's daughter got killed by a DUI accident. And so he sees that guy and goes on a giant tear trying to kill him, and they have to get away and stuff. But it's really interesting.
Oh, that's cool. That sounds interesting. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, it's very creepy.
Sounds very creepy.
Yes.
Cool.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And help us get to all the rest of the countries. So tell all your friends to listen to us as well in other countries.
Yes, all your pen pal friends. Good to know.
Yes, pen pals. Yes, for sure. I had a pen pal when I was a kid.
Nice.
All right. Love you, bud. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, friends. Thank you for supporting our podcast. Please share our show with your brutal and bizarre friends. Give us a Boozy follow on your favorite podcast platform. If you're feeling extra generous, we'd appreciate a 5-star rating or review as well. But maybe do that sober so all the letters are in the right place.
You can find all our contact information in the show notes. We love hearing from you, and if you're interested in helping us stock the bar for our future Boozy episodes, you can find our Patreon link in the show notes as well.